Second look.
Have you ever noticed how some television shows use a lot of violence and other shows don't use any at all?
Even if they're dramatic shows, some still don't seem to need violence. It got us thinking.
Because violence turns up everywhere. Ads, rock videos, comics, commercials. It makes you wonder, does it really need to be there?
Or is it just another device, like lighting and stereotypes of men and women?
So we thought we'd go talk about violence with someone who writes television shows for a living.
Rick Drew is a story editor and writes some of the scripts for the popular TV show MacGyver. He met us at the studio where MacGyver is filmed and talked to us in the set they used for the houseboat where MacGyver lives.
Do TV shows try to appeal to different people, the same way rock videos and rock album covers do? How do they do it?
Well, to a degree, any kind of media that is being presented to the public, whether it's a cornflakes box or an album cover or a television show, is all marketing. MacGyver has a varied audience. I think a lot of women find MacGyver, the character, Richard Dean Anderson, the actor, attractive and fun to watch, so they tune in because he's got good dimples or nice hair or whatever. And a lot of kids tune in to see what the MacGyverisms are going to be this week and what kind of clever way he's going to find to get out of a situation. Mm-hmm. So people watch shows for different reasons, and very often TV will have a target audience, and the people who watch Golden Girls are not necessarily going to watch MacGyver. Mm-hmm. And so there's a difference. And they pick out their market, and they gear the show towards the people they think it will appeal to. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. The public is different.
I've noticed some action shows use violence and some don't. Why is violence used in TV shows?
It all comes down to a character in danger. And in order, for example, in an action show like MacGyver, the hero has to face danger in order to be a hero. Unless he has odds to overcome and obstacles to beat that are of a threat to him, there's not really the excitement. If MacGyver is going to be in an avalanche of rocks and he has to do something clever to get himself into shelter when those rocks are coming down, that's tension and excitement, and there's threat and danger there. If he's in a marshmallow factory and all these marshmallows are going to come down on him, he's just going to look up and people are going to laugh, and there's no drama in that. And so where things get out of hand, I think, on television violence, and it's something we try to avoid on MacGyver, is where in order to make your hero strong, you have to make your villain strong. And the villain is not always a person. Sometimes it's the forces of nature. It could be a forest fire or a gas leak or anything like that, but it's potentially deadly. And the more potentially deadly you make the threat against the hero, the more heroic the hero becomes. And if you watch television, you'll often see those sort of things. The more simplistic a show, the more ordinary the show, the more obvious those kind of devices become. And when you watch a show, hopefully like MacGyver, we try to be a lot more clever than that. For example, we did an episode of MacGyver where he was in a supermarket and he had a terrible cold and he needed to get some cold remedies. And when he was in the store, some bad guys came in with guns and were robbing the store.
All right, folks, you know what this is. Everybody listen up.
If he were Dirty Harry, he would probably have disarmed one of the bad guys and used their weapon against them and blown them all away, and they'd have gone flying through windows and all of that sort of thing. But MacGyver sees things a little differently because there is an awareness of what violence does to people in the show. He wouldn't shoot anybody. because it would be too extreme a way of dealing with the situation. Plus, somebody else might get hurt. That's the difference between the edge of reality we try to do in MacGyver. If you were in a real supermarket and somebody was getting shot, or somebody was in danger of being shot, you would probably not do anything. You'd probably just stay very still and hope that things resolve themselves and that everybody who was dangerous went away, which would be the smart thing to do. But on television, a hero has to be a hero. But MacGyver, what he did was he went around and he got a hot water bottle and some baking soda and some vinegar and some spices and put the vinegar and baking soda in the hot water bottle. He then put spices in there, and then he pretended to come upon the bad guys robbing the store, and he surrendered. And then when they weren't prepared, he used a pen to pop the hot water bottle, and it caused instant tear gas to spray in the face of the bad guys, and he was able to disarm them with nobody getting hurt and no violence taking place. But there was action, and there was threat, and there's all of those things that make a story exciting, and you wonder what's going to happen, but nobody got hurt, and nobody had to get hurt.
How is violence used by writers in a TV story?
Well, violence, if you'll notice, when you're watching television, moments that threaten the characters, the big moment usually comes in the middle of the show. And that's because they want you to keep watching past the toilet paper commercials and all of those different things. Because unfortunately what television often becomes is the space between the commercials. And when shows resort to that, they usually use the easiest devices. And very often those easy devices involve either sex or violence, because those are the sorts of things that are immediately attracting somebody's attention. If they see sexy people, they respond to them the same way that they do in advertising. If they see something violent, they respond to them too, because they all go to our basic emotions and our basic reflex responses. And that's what makes it a shortcut and a device.
How do TV writers use stereotypes?
Well, very often in stories, writers will relate or resort to stereotypes. And by stereotype, I mean, it's like Three's Company is a good example of stereotypes, where you have the bumbling guy, and you have the sexy girls, and then you have the funny landlord, and it's all of these characters who you recognize immediately. And it creates a situation where the writer doesn't have to explain who this character is, because you've seen that character so many times on so many shows, you instantly know who they are, and you can get on with telling the story.
After something violent happens on TV, why don't I always see what happens after?
Well, part of that is the restriction of what you're seeing on television in terms of the time that there is to tell a story. You have to make big assumptions sometimes. In a novel, for example, you can have a violent thing happen and somebody is shot or whatever, and then you can go to the hospital and then you can see how the guy's doing, and then they talk to the doctors. And very often there isn't time to do that in a TV show, because you have to keep the story moving between the commercials. Again, it's an unfortunate reality of storytelling on television. And the byproduct of that is that the violence becomes unrealistic, and there's no responsibility involved in the actions that characters have taken. There's a big assumption made. I mean, you see the hero shot at the end of the series, or at the end of the episode, and he's clutching his shoulder, and they fade out and they go to the commercial, and then you come back on, and it's 3 days later, and he's in a sling, and everything is wonderful. Well, the reality is he'd probably be in months of physiotherapy and have lead poisoning and God knows what else. I read somewhere that by the time you're 18 years old, you have seen 50,000 people killed on television. And that's a tremendous amount of mayhem and violence. And I think that has some effect on the way people view violence in reality. But then, you know, it's all part of the nature of television storytelling. And unfortunately, a lot of what television uses as a device to tell a story as quickly as possible isn't reality. And the important thing is to make the distinction between what's real and what's a storytelling device.
Wow. I never knew how violence on television could be used to keep our attention. So, it's a device too, just like stereotyping, sound, and color.
Right. Like Rick said, different stories use violence in different ways. It can be used to resolve a conflict quickly, to keep a story simple, or to create tension, so we want to keep watching. It all depends on what audience the show wants to get.
Yeah, but the problem with TV violence is we don't see what really happens to real people when they get hurt.
From now on, I'm taking a second look at the media I watch.
No kidding. I mean, I knew it was made up, but I never knew just how much of it was made up with me in mind. And other people just like me.
I know what you mean, Jake. But really, there's no one else quite like you.
I don't like the sound of that.